Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, hello. So, usually on this channel, I do video games. I focus on that. I talk a little wrestling, MMA, sports. But today, because of the weekend, I got to get into a couple things really quickly based on what I saw yesterday. I'm going to start real quick. We'll talk about this jersey that you're looking at on your screen. Is it Garoppolo? Is it Johnson? Is it Purdy? Is it me? Is it my nephew? I think it's my neighbor, his cousin. Those are all the people who have played quarterback for the 49ers in the last 10 minutes. And all of us have gotten hurt. You talk about a team that they've won 5 Super Bowls in their history, and they've been to 7, I believe. And I actually feel bad for them because they had injuries at the most critical position in sports at the worst time. And this is considering they went into an NFC championship game with their third string rookie quarterback, Mr. Irrelevant, the last pick in the draft. And they still got to the NFC title game, and then he gets hurt. And then his backup, who is technically the fourth string quarterback, he gets hurt. You can't make this misery up. I feel bad for the 49ers, and it brought me to there was an article that came out last night by Mike Florio on NBC Sports where he talks about how in 2011 the NFL had a rule about a third quarterback being carried as a 46th member of the active roster, and that if he came into the game after the start of the fourth quarter, that any of the 3 active quarterbacks could come back into the game. If he came into the game before the fourth quarter, that only that quarterback could play. I think it's time to adjust the roster rules to the point that it's similar to baseball. In Major League Baseball, at the end of the season, going into the playoffs, they have expanded rosters. I think the NFL needs to have expanded rosters for certain positions. One of those positions is quarterback. The other one, I could argue, should be kicker. Here's why, and maybe long snapper. These positions are crafts. They are not just positions, they are crafts. There's not enough people on this planet who can actually read a defense and make all the throws with the football at a professional level. There's just not a lot of people that can do it. Okay? And there are even less people that can do it well. The NFL can't have games without a true professional quarterback. The game doesn't move. Every play, essentially, outside of your special trick plays, the quarterback has to touch the football. The quarterback is a necessity to make the game move. It doesn't work without the quarterback. I used to think the point guard was similar, but here's the difference. In the NBA, now that they play quote-unquote positionless basketball, you got power forwards, and I don't think they should be doing it, but power forwards bringing the ball up the court. You got people who are not the point guard dominating the ball. In football, the center doesn't drop back to pass. The wide receiver doesn't stand 5 yards deep taking a shotgun pass, okay? For the most part, it's the quarterback. The game doesn't work without the quarterback. So the NFL, with all the money we bet on these games, they can't afford to have a non-professional taking those snaps. You can't afford to have a guy who is already the third string being forced to play with one arm. I think the NFL should allow teams to have 2 to 3 extra quarterbacks just for that position who can come into the game in case of emergency without penalty to the team. Because it helps the game to move on television. It helps the game to function properly. It keeps things on the up and up. Now, look, it's not going to be Joe Montana coming off the bench. All right? It's not going to be Tom Brady. It's not going to be a Hall of Famer. But what you might have is somebody who's at least competent, who at least in their life has thrown more than 2 passes. Not somebody who played pee-wee football, played quarterback. Not someone who ran the wishbone in college. Somebody who actually took snaps. I don't think that's an unreasonable ask. The kicker, the long snapper, but especially the quarterback. Let's do what we have to do to make sure these games are on the up and up. Because it was the equivalent of a game not being on the up and up when you have your fourth string quarterback playing. That can't happen. Well, speaking of not on the up and up, This is not a picture of the Empire State Building repping the Jets. This is not the Empire State Building acknowledging Green Day. This is the Empire State Building in New York City acknowledging the Philadelphia Eagles winning the NFC Championship game. I repeat, the Empire State Building in New York City repping the Philadelphia Eagles. Are you kidding me? This is a disgrace. Whoever decided to do this has to be fired immediately. Send them on a bus to Philly. I don't care that they did this for the Chiefs too. I don't care. All right? This is a disgrace. Let me explain to you why this can't happen. Number one, Philadelphia is not part of the New York City metropolitan area. It's not. If the New Jersey Devils win the Stanley Cup and they want to rep them, that's acceptable. Why? Because at least New Jersey shares transportation with New York. New Jersey shares the tolls, the transit authority. Okay? There's at least some revenue share, some connection there. The two football teams who represent New York actually play in New Jersey. There's a legit connection. Philadelphia is our rival. All right? So that's number one, why you shouldn't do this. Number two, the Philadelphia Eagles eliminated the Giants last week. How can you represent them here? How can you honor them here? Number three, would Philly do that for us? Do you think the Rocky statue would have a Lawrence Taylor jersey on it? Do you think the Rocky statue would have a Rangers or a Knicks jersey on it if we eliminated one of their teams like the Flyers or the Sixers? Are you kidding me? No, they would never do that. Never. They'd hit you in the head with a bottle before they'd acknowledge you. Are you kidding? That's a disgrace. Disgrace. And last but absolutely not least, okay, Boston and Philly are chief rivals of New York in a lot of different ways, but especially in sports. And this is a representation of what is wrong with New York in 2023, okay? Philly and Boston are still the 70s style, 40s, 50s style, visceral, angry sports fan base that you are not sure if you want to go to their stadium representing your team. They are still the fan base that screams and yells and fights and argues for their team. They are still the cities that have a ruggedness enough to never acknowledge the other team. But New York is different now. Oh, New York has a lot of transplants now. No. What New York has become? New York has become soft. This is soft. This is weak. This is pathetic. This is inexcusable. New York City should never acknowledge Philly, Kansas City, Berlin, London, I don't care what, okay? Unless there's a tragedy and you're showing support outside the boundaries of sports competition. This is not something you should do. Ever. Absolute embarrassment, okay? Embarrassment. And that's going to take me to my final point here. My final point is on the sports teams of this region and why it's so vital right now for this resurgence that I think is coming. And let's start with the obvious, all right? There are 9 professional sports teams in this region. 9. Okay? Yeah, that's right. There are 9. And that's not counting the 2 soccer teams. So if you want to count them, there's 11. But of the 9 professional sports teams, and that doesn't count the WNBA team, okay? And there are other teams in this region, but I'm just going to count the major ones. The Yankees and the Mets. You had 99 wins for the Yankees, 101 for the Mets. Both made the playoffs. Both should be perennial playoff contenders, if not championship contenders. Okay? The Giants and the Jets. Of all these teams, the Jets are the only ones in the calendar year that had a losing record, and the Jets are not a bad team. They just need improvement at quarterback, which we're going to discuss in a later video. But the point is, the Jets are not a bad team. They're a team on the rise. The Giants won 9 games, made the playoffs, even won a playoff game. The Knicks and the Nets are both in contention. The Knicks are in the 7th seed, probably going to maybe get to the 6th seed, but if not, they'll be in the playoff play-in. The Nets are in the 3rd seed. They should make the playoffs, okay, even without KD for the next couple weeks. The Rangers, Islanders, and Devils all have winning records. The Devils have the 3rd best record in the NHL. The Rangers are in playoff position, and the Islanders are just outside of the last playoff spot, but they probably will make the playoffs. We're talking about all 3 hockey teams being in the playoffs, both basketball teams being in the playoffs, 2 football teams on the rise, seriously, one of them who just made the playoffs, and the Mets and the Yankees both making the playoffs. Every team in a sports calendar year, except for the Jets, making the playoffs. This is necessary for this region because what I'm seeing, not only is it pathetic for New York City to allow their Empire State Building, literally Statue of Liberty, Empire State Building, Times Square, there are certain landmarks that that are staples of a region. You can't dishonor them by honoring Philadelphia. Come on, that's a joke. But that tells you how important it is for these teams to win and there to be a resurgence of pride in this area for their own teams, okay? Because Boston and Philly have dominated sports in this region for the past 23 years. They have. I know there's some notable exceptions, okay? Have we had a few World Series appearances? Have we had a couple Super Bowls with the Giants? Absolutely. But overall, the Red Sox, the Patriots, the Bruins, the Celtics, the Phillies, and now the Eagles, they have dominated sports in this region. They really have. They've overshadowed some of the appearances by the Rangers, the Devils, the Yankees, the Mets, and the Giants. They have overshadowed them. We've had our moments because, look, there's 9 teams, right? The Nets back-to-back NBA Final appearances in the early 2000s. The Yankees and Mets World Series in 2000. The Yankees World Series win in 2009. The Giants 2007 defeat of Boston's Patriots, right? Again in 11 of the Patriots. The Jets back-to-back AFC title games. The Devils 2003 Stanley Cup. The 2000 Stanley Cup. Losing to LA in 2011. Of course, the Rangers 2012 Stanley Cup. So have there been some appearances? The Mets 2015. Absolutely. Absolutely. The ALCS appearances by the Baby Boom Bombers. But overall, the teams that have been getting and winning championships have been from Philly and Boston in this region. So it's important. It is vital for the teams in this area to not only start being consistent playoff contenders, but for a few of them to win some championships and make sure that Boston and Philly doesn't continue to dominate. Because of the Northeast, Boston and Philly have dominated sports in this region. Dominated. And when that happens, you get some transplants and you get some participation trophy lovers going into New York and convincing themselves and some of the idiots who run the Empire State Building that it's a good idea to acknowledge, our friends from the city of brotherly love. Acknowledge them. Acknowledge what? They wouldn't acknowledge you if you were on fire. So no, don't acknowledge them. It's time for this area to win some championships, to compete, and to get its visceral anger back in its sports fan base so that we don't have to ever see anything like that again. And we're not watching Philly parade around with their chest out and their nose up in the air. And we don't have to listen to Boston talk about all their titles, all right? No more. No more Boston tea. No more Philly cheese. I don't want to hear it. It's time for these teams to win. And with the 9 teams all on the rise, all competing right now, I believe that we are going to see a resurgence, if we haven't already begun to see it. And that in this decade and the next decade, we're going to get some championships back in this region. And then we'll have some real fun here in the Corner Arcade. Thank you, everybody.